Hello and welcome to episode 130 of Tom's Hirschsprung's podcast. I'm delighted this afternoon to be joined by Andrea. Andrea, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
No, thank you so much for coming on. Now we're here to talk about your child with Hirschsprung's and of a um, total colonic Hirschsprungs as well, which obviously is incredibly rare. So to have a very rare condition and then have another very rare diagnosis on top, obviously,
hmm
incredibly rare story. But I guess if you could take us back, well, start from wherever you like.
Yeah, so he is 3 years old right now, so I will do my best to rewind and start from the very beginning. Um, so I had a very easy, normal pregnancy. I'm one of those rare ones that loves being pregnant. I had no issues whatsoever. And my water broke naturally, and I headed to the hospital. And I was doctoring about 2 hours from my house. So I'm driving over there, and everything's fine. We get there, and everything happens really fast. I'm dilating fast, and I start pushing way too early. And he actually gets stuck in my birth canal, and they had to use forceps to get him out. So I'm telling you this because um, his diagnosis wasn't caught right away, and I feel like it's because of this trauma. So they kept me and him there a couple days extra just for some observation, and he wasn't eating right off the bat. And so they kind of chalked it up to, like he's had some birth trauma. He's probably got a sore neck, like doesn't isn't comfortable. So they just dismissed that, and they just encouraged me to pump so that my milk would come in, and then keep trying every couple hours. And I think he ate one time total, and we still kept having issues. And so they thought maybe he had a tongue tie, and he actually did. So they went and clipped his tongue to get rid of that, and that didn't change anything. So we kept trying and trying. I had worked with different lactation consultants, and a couple days go by. It's day 3, and he hasn't pooped yet. He hasn't passed the newborn meconium. And so they're like, well, that's kind of strange. We'll give him a suppository, and then when he poops, you can go home. And I was like, okay, well, sure. Like, this is my first baby. This is my first pregnancy, never been a mom. I didn't know what is normal, what is not normal. Like this stuff is not in the baby books. So, um, I think you also naturally trust your care team. Like I'm not going to question anything that they're doing. So they give him a suppository. He smears a little bit, and then they're like, okay, well, he pooped. You can go home. Everything's great. And I think we were home for 5 days, and I had had another appointment with a lactation consultant to try to get him breastfeeding. And during that appointment, we're talking about how he's still not eating. He's maybe taking, I think it was like 15 milliliters at a time, like just a tiny, tiny amount. And I mentioned like, and he's still not pooping. And she's like, "Oh, well, that's normal. Breastfed babies don't poop every day." And I was like, "Yeah, but he's like not pooping." Like, and she called up my doctor to see if he was available, and he's like, "Give it 2 more days, and if not, like we'll give him another suppository." And so we do that, and then I give him the suppository, and he actually like poops so much it like shoots across my living room. Like it's like a massive amount. So obviously he feels great now. So he starts eating a little bit more. I think he got up to maybe 20 milliliters. And so it's still not a lot. I'm using like the tiny, tiny baby bottles from the hospital. And I took him to the chiropractor a couple times because I've heard that that can help. Getting adjusted can help digestive issues, and he did confirm that he had some neck trauma, so we worked through that and things got better. He never breastfed yet, but he was feeling better, you could tell. And then another 5 6 days go by and he doesn't poop. And so I call up his doctor and I mentioned that. And I said, should I give him another suppository? And he's like, well, no, we don't want him to get dependent on that. Like, he needs to learn to use his muscles, and kind of made it sound like it was him holding his poop in, like not using his muscles. And I thought that was interesting because I'm like, don't babies just know how to poop? Like, so um I ended up getting kind of frustrated with that doctor. So I switched doctors and I took him to, I think he was 20 days old. And I took him to a new doctor. And I said, this is what's happening. This is what's going on. Like, I just feel in my gut that something's not right. And she's like, okay, well, how about we take some x-rays, and like, if that makes you comfortable, like if that'll make you feel better. And I said, yes, please. And she gives me a call the next day when they get reviewed, and there's nothing showing any kind of blockage. There's nothing that is concerning whatsoever. So I'm like, okay, it's just me. Like, I'm overreacting. I'm a new mom, I'm whatever. And she also said, gave me the line, breastfed babies don't poop every day. Like, it's totally normal. Like, don't freak out. So I started keeping a diary of how many days he was going without pooping and how much he was eating and all of this, because I'm just like, something's not normal about this. Like, I can't put my finger on it. And then day 26, he's 26 days old and he starts vomiting. And it's like so much vomit, like projectile vomiting after every time I try to feed him. And I freaked out. I told my husband we should take him to the ER. And me and my husband are very, I have enough nurse friends to know what constitutes an ER visit, like your arm should be falling off. So we're just like, okay, we're just going to wait this out, see how it goes. It's probably not an emergency. Maybe it's something I ate, because he is drinking my breast milk, So we waited out, and he's like, if he's still puking in the morning, make an appointment. So I did, because he puked all night. And then as I'm buckling him into the car seat to bring him to this appointment, his vomit turned bright green. And I instantly started panicking because I've never seen that before. I'm like, something's not right. And so I rush him over there. They take more x-rays. They can't find anything. And he's vomiting this green stuff the entire time. And she's like, okay, so where I should really stop and say where I live is like the middle of nowhere. So like population 100 people. And so the nearest hospital is 20 minutes away, but they're very rural healthcare. So she, bless her soul, was honest enough, sat me down and said, I don't know what's going on. And I don't have, she's like, I just don't have the knowledge to figure this out. I'm going to give Children's Hospital in Sioux Falls a call and just see what they recommend. And I said, great, sounds good. And she calls them and she sends over the x-rays, and they're like, we need him on a helicopter ASAP. And she comes back, she tells me that, and I'm a mess, because I'm like, what do you mean? Like, is my baby okay? Like, excuse me.
Yeah.
I did bring my Kleenexes. I kind of figured this was going to happen. So, and mind you, I'm 4 weeks postpartum. So, like, I'm just a wreck in the first place. And my baby is supposed to go on a helicopter, and I don't know why. Like, nobody can tell me what's wrong with him. So I'm just a mess. And so this was it was 10 o'clock when I brought him there, and the helicopter finally came at 2. So this was a while. And I'm breastfeeding, so I don't have anything with me. So I choose to not get on the helicopter with my baby and go home and pack a bag so that I can pump and head to the hospital. And that was really hard too because I wanted to be with my baby. And then I call up my husband and I tell him what's going on, and he's at work hours hours away. So he leaves work, starts heading home so he can pack, and we drive separate. And I get to the hospital, and I think on the helicopter they tried, and I'm not going to know the specific name, but they tried to release air out of his digestive system. They put a tubing down him, and nothing came up. So they took it out. And then I get to the hospital, and he's just there in a room by himself. And, like there's nothing happening. Well, they had already did the ultrasound, they had already did more x-rays. And at this point, they think it's pyloric stenosis, which I believe is the valve between your esophagus or your intestine and your stomach. Sometimes it needs to be repaired. And so they did the ultrasound, and it ruled out that it wasn't that stenosis. So they didn't know what was really happening. So they were just kind of observing him at this point. And then his vomits, so he's still vomiting, and mind you, he hasn't eaten in 2 days. So I think that says a lot. And then his vomits had stopped from bright green, and they had turned to this orange, like foul smell, like it smelled like stool. It was the most rancid smell. I will never forget that smell. And I'm putting the call light on every time this happens because I'm just losing it. I'm like, what is happening to my baby? Like, there's something wrong. And every nurse is just, okay, well, we'll document it. And I'm just getting so frustrated. And all of a sudden, this nurse walks by, and I refer to my son as my miracle baby because these miracles just kept happening. Um, and this was the first miracle. So this nurse walks by, and she's not even my nurse. She's not on my wing. She's not taking care of my son. She just happens to walk by, and she goes, I recognize that smell. I know that smell. You need to speak to a GI surgeon immediately. And she runs to go get a surgeon. And they're like, okay, I'm pretty sure this is Hirschsprung's. Like, we need to do a biopsy and test for that. And we're going to order, an upper GI study and a contrast enema. And I said, okay. So we do all of that. And so I believe, so it was actually this time 3 years ago, which is kind of crazy now that I think about it. It was Memorial Day weekend, and he's like, the biopsy results usually take 3 to 5 days, but because it's a holiday, it's going to take even longer. And I said, great. So they teach me how to do irrigations, and so we start doing those, I think, like every 4 to 6 hours. And then it relieved a lot of stool. So he actually started eating again, which is really great. And so they do the biopsy, they do the contrast enema, they don't see anything with that. And then the biopsy comes back positive. So the biopsy tests for ganglion cells being present. And that's what is the nerve cells in your colon that pushes the stool along. So it tested positive that he didn't have those. So he technically had Hirschsprung's. So, but because of his condition and because of how weak he was, they weren't comfortable doing surgery that day. They were actually planning on giving us sending us home for 2 weeks and doing the irrigations and sending us back to do what's called a pull through procedure. And then everything went south. He stopped eating again, and the irrigation stopped working. Nothing was coming out, and they just had made the decision. Okay, he needs this surgery now, and so we go to the surgery tower at Sanford. Everything's in different buildings, so this is this was interesting to me. I've never, I mean, I've never had a surgery ever in my life, but I went to the surgery tower and they have what's like a giant family common area. So what was weird for me is I'm an empath, so I pick up on everyone's energy, and it's just like people over to your left are, with planned family members, and they're having coffee and they're having cookies and everything's great. Like they're here because they're getting their rotator cuff repaired and they've had this surgery on the books for 18 months and they're just ready to get it done. And then there's people over here crying because they're waiting for their grandpa who's having emergency surgery. And it's just I just thought it was the weirdest, most uncomfortable room to ever be in because it's anyway.
Yeah.
So we sit down and we're in the waiting room, and they're like, "Well, here's some coffee, here's some cookies," and I have to laugh because I'm like, I don't even know if my son's okay. Like, I don't really care about a cookie. But so they have this at Sanford. They have this text messaging that updates you about the surgery. So we sign up for that, and I get my first text message. He's out, anesthesia. He's under, everything looks good. Surgery is about to begin. And then they say, you'll get a text update every hour. So the first hour goes by, I get an update, and it said, yep, surgery is going well. Everything looks or going as expected. It was just very generic. And then the next hour goes by and I don't get an update. And he had originally told me it might take 3 to 4 hours. So I didn't freak out. And then the fourth hour goes by and there's no update. And I start freaking out a little bit. And then the nurse calls us and says, Dr. Keckler and his team want to speak with you guys. And I'm like in shambles because I just have no idea what's happening. And they sit us down. So it's Dr. Keckler and Dr. Gora, who I am so grateful to God that they are our care team because they're incredible. They sit us down and they're like, hey, we were about halfway through the surgery, and so when they went into the surgery, their job is to determine how much of the colon does not have those ganglion cells. So they're testing every few centimeters to see what part of the colon still works, what part of the colon need or doesn't work, so they know where to reconnect everything. And he stops and he's like, I have no idea how your son made it this long. And
Wow.
he
That's
goes, it is a miracle that he is alive. And he goes, we have tested every part of his large intestine and there is no ganglion cells present. And he said, we are halfway through the small intestine and there are no ganglion cells present. So he's like, we have to, at this point, he needs a colostomy and an ileostomy. And so they were kind enough to pull us aside and just give us an update because he said it's going to be another hour or so. while we performed this part of the surgery. And I said, okay, thank you for letting us know. And we leave, and I am just a mess. Like, I remember calling my mom and just crying and crying. It was really hard. And I'm just thinking in my brain this whole time, like just kind of angry, that nobody listened to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that's got to be the most frustrating part of all.
So, yeah, he comes out of surgery, and we um we go to see him, and it's horrible. He's gray colored, and he's weak, and he just doesn't look like my baby. And um then I think the next day I get, or no, it was the same day. It was like a couple hours later, I get a new nurse who is so she's a doctor on our surgical care team, but she's called the stoma nurse. So she comes in and she gives me an hour-long lesson on being a stoma nurse and what a stoma is, and how to change the bags, and how to empty them, and lessons on skincare. And I just I just remember, like, at one point I'm like, I haven't even processed my son getting on the helicopter yet. And it's just been, one thing after another, like irrigations, surgeries, stomas. And it was just a lot. And I say that, I want to mention that because there is so much trauma that happens to us parents. To my son, yes, of course, but to also us as caretakers and parents, and a mother. And so I'm just, at this point, I'm just going through the motions, and I have to add too. So, like, I'm sitting there during my son's 6-hour surgery, and I'm stepping away every 2 hours to go pump. So I'm walking back across the street to his room, and it's so much. And I remember thinking at one point, like, why am I doing this? Like, I should, I shouldn't be doing this, because it's so much added emotionally, and so much physically after what I'm going through. Like, I didn't even need to, I should have just got on that helicopter and stopped. And I learned later that he wouldn't be able to tolerate formula. So I was grateful that I continued breastfeeding, because my breast milk was the best thing for him. So I'm glad that I pushed through that. But to rewind a little bit, I in the hospital, I'm going through all this, and I'm just kind of, I'm in robot mode. I'm just kind of going through the motions, because I haven't really processed any of this. And um so we spent a few, I think, more days there. We were there start to finish 15 days. So we go home, and we start caring for start our new chapter or whatever. And the way that I understood it was, if I lived in Sioux Falls, I would have a stoma nurse come out to my house and help me with my son. And because I lived where I lived, that wasn't an option. So that is why she had to teach me all the ins and outs. And I'm glad that I did. And it wasn't very hard for me, because in high school I was a CNA. So I had seen colostomy bags before. I had already knew what to do with them. So that wasn't too big of a challenge. But learning all of the stuff for a baby and going through, you know, I th- the insurance the insurance struggles were a nightmare. I remember, so there was only two options of bags available for infants, and both of them kind of sucked. And so I remember, he would have, like, if I didn't apply it exactly perfectly, or if I used too much powder or too much this, and or if he was a little bit sweaty, or rolled the wrong way, like this bag would fall off. And I remember going through, 10 bags in one day sometimes. And the frustrating part was my insurance would only cover 20 in a month. And I was so upset about that. Like, there's been quite a few things on our journey, just with powders and creams and things that insurance will not cover, that I just am so frustrated by. But um, that is probably our worst nightmare as a family, just the cost of everything and the financial pressures, like, because the insurance part is just not fair at all.
No.
But um, so we do that. And I remember, just about the time that I would get the hang of what I'm doing, he would have a growth spurt, and I would need a new bag. So that was fun. And so I specifically remember, now I'm living in fight or flight mode all the time. I'm like sleeping with one eye open. I'm putting him right next to me in bed because I'm terrified he's gonna rip his bag off, or he's gonna roll onto his bag, or something's gonna happen. And so I'm with him 24/7. I remember not going out in public a lot just because it was a hassle. I remember one time we went to the county fair on a whim. So I didn't have anything with me, and it's super hot out, and he starts sweating, and the bag starts falling off, and I'm like just in shambles because I just don't know. Like, it's just living with high anxiety 24/7. Like, you're just waiting for something bad to happen, and it's it's rough. And I just want to mention that because I've had to do so much work to get out of that and to heal from all of that. I mean, it's tough on your marriage as well. I remember waking my husband up several times in the night to help me change the bag, because it's a two-person job, honestly. It really is. Um, so yeah, we so that was our life for 18 months. 18 months is the age that my care team wanted him to be when they performed the pull through surgery. So, and in this span of time, I am getting married, planning a wedding, and I feel like I kind of used that as a way to kind of cope through everything, because on the outside, I'm like, oh, this is so much fun. Like, I'm getting married, I'm planning a wedding, like, everything's great, life is fantastic. And I'm just pushing the trauma aside, until I'm ready to actually deal with what I just went through, which is a lot. And so I get married, and on our honeymoon, I actually get pregnant with our daughter. So by the time surgery runs around, I am 7 months pregnant. And so now I'm wondering, so should I do this surgery now, or should we wait? Because he always said, you know, when the time comes, don't expect this to happen. We can push it out until whenever you're ready. Like, we can do it when he's 5, we can do it when he's 7. We just want him minimum at least 18 months because of his build, how he would grow, and they would have more intestine to work with. So I I made the decision to go ahead and do it now because in my brain I thought, well, I might as well do it now because what am I going to do with my second child later? This will just be easier. And it definitely was not. um, so just to rewind a little bit, so in the beginning of his life, I was not able to find daycare. So my mother was watching him. And when I got pregnant with my second child, she had said, I'm not really comfortable with two kids. Can you try to find daycare? And so I had found him a spot in daycare. And once I put him in daycare, he was constantly sick. Like every week, he was sick. And so when surgery time rolled around, he was sick and he had a small fever. And so I rescheduled a couple times, and then we we finally set a date. We head down there. We get a hotel room because you have to be there at like 6 a.m. And we wake up and he has a fever, and they're like, we cannot move forward. Like we're through the pre-check, we're through the meet with anesthesia, we're through everything, and they took his temperature and he had a fever, and they're like, we can't perform the surgery. And I remember being so angry and looking back selfish because of course I'm like, we spent all this money on the hotel, we've missed work, we've done this, like what is the big deal? And he, bless him, he cares so much to explain like the because I guess in my head I did not connect how extreme of a surgery this was. Like it is a life-changing massive surgery on a toddler. And so he sat me down, he's like, hey, this is the problem. If we go in and we do this surgery and something goes wrong, we 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 gauge the success of this surgery by regulating his temperature. If he goes in with a fever, we can't regulate his temperature, and we don't know if he's getting an infection. We can't. And he was, bless his soul, he's so good at explaining that. So I finally, it kind of hit me how massive this surgery was. So I'm like, okay, yep, let's go home and we'll we'll reschedule. So I think we rescheduled for the next month. So we go in and everything looks good. He's ready. He has no fever. They can proceed with the surgery. And then I remember my husband and I, because the doctor had asked if one of us wanted to be there when he was put under to hold his hand. And I remember um, my husband was just a mess about that. So I volunteered to do that. And I mean, I need to I need to backtrack. So when we're in the hospital, the first time, like even before they're putting him on the helicopter, watching your baby, watching people put IVs into your baby is just, it's so much. And I remember four people holding down my 26-day-old baby because he's fighting so hard. And I just find that it's just really hard. So we, a couple times at the hospital, they actually asked us if they wanted us to take him to another room to put the IVs in so we wouldn't have to watch or leave the room. And I thought that was so nice because it's very traumatizing. Um, so my husband passed and I chose to walk down and hold his hand, which was kind of, I loved it and didn't love it. It was a nice moment, but then so we go downstairs. He goes out and they perform the surgery. So during this specific pull through surgery, they removed the part of the intestine that did not work. and they took the remaining small intestine that did work and they stretched it. And there was a specific medical term for that, but I don't know it. And then they reconnected it to his rectum, which they also had to stretch. And they made that sound like this would give him more time to get to the bathroom, is why they were doing that. So everything went great. Before they went into the surgery, they had asked me and my husband, hey, we have this opportunity to use robotics. Are you comfortable with that? And we said, yeah, sure. Like, we'll do anything, anything that will help you guys. And when he gets out of surgery, he point blank is said, if we had not used robotics, this surgery would not have been successful. And so I was grateful for that. I'm very grateful for that. I am so grateful that we live in a time that that's even a thing, to have a robotic assistant in surgery. But just so I understood it, he has such a tiny body, and they were able to use these robot hands to keep him open so they could visually see better and do everything better. And I just thought that was so cool. Like, and yeah, so we're grateful for that. We're grateful that we said yes and that everything worked out. And then the hard part came. So I think we're in the hospital 2 weeks, and then I kept him home from daycare another week after that. I stayed home with him while we kind of figured out our new life. So the bags were gone. So I'm taking care of those incisions because they're healing. They had sewn them shut, but they still needed to be cared for. And then they wanted to make sure that he was pooping and everything was coming out properly before we left the hospital. So he was doing that in the hospital. And essentially, because he has no large intestine, everything pretty much runs right through him. So we had to start him on Imodium to slow down his bowels, which he takes 3 times a day. And then that helps slow things down. So when it was coming right through him, it was basically like an acid. So it would really wreck his skin. It would burn his skin, and we'd had a lot of diaper rash and really horrible time with diaper changes. So we had to figure out the right dosage of that. And then about, I think it was 6 months later, because I was doing follow ups every month, and then we went down to 3 months, and then every 6 months. I was telling my care team, I said, it's just really weird. I feel like he is really good, and then he has, he's good for 2 weeks, and then he has this week of like diarrhea like episode where he's not sick, but he's having a hard time. He's crying about stomach pains, and mind you, he's also a toddler, so he can't really communicate that with me. I hear a lot of gurgling in his gut, and I'm just like, I just think that there's something going on. And she goes, yep, I know exactly what you're talking about. Bless this care team. Like, they have dealt with Hirschsprung's kids a lot. They have a big caseload of them, so they know. Not every child is the same, of course, but they know enough to be able to tell me this is what's going on. Yep, we know what to do. And so she said, yep, he needs a dose of antibiotics every 21 days, and that will clear his gut up. And she kind of explained it to me where because the large intestine is what breaks down your food, because he doesn't have that part, everything's kind of just sitting in his gut and fermenting. So that's what makes him kind of sick and lethargic and bubbly. And so the antibiotics break all that up. And I've learned now after some time that it's mostly due to his diet. So he doesn't process sugar very well. So I try to keep him sugar free. Um, and I need to push carbs and white rice and constipating foods. He basically eats what's called like the brat diet, which is like breads, apples, pastas, bananas. So, and then he also has a dairy allergy. So we didn't, they kind of started us off dairy free since the very beginning because dairy and GI stuff don't really get along. But he kept having like these weird reactions to like tiny amount, like it'd be like butter in a recipe, So I took him to an allergist and it was confirmed he has a dairy allergy to the actual milk protein. So I stopped feeding him dairy and that got a lot better. And so I need to rewind a little bit too because I'm going from stoma mom who when you have stomas, you have a very strict um food avoidance list. So he is a baby and I can't give him, anything with seeds or anything that could potentially cause a blockage in his stoma. So he didn't eat a lot of like fresh fruits and veggies and now he can. So I'm like, I'm transitioning to giving him, fresh fruits and veggies. And he's now a toddler and he's never seen one. So he's naturally like, what is this? And doesn't want to eat it. So that is now our biggest struggle is he's 3 and he has went a good chunk of his life not eating these particular foods and now he can eat them and he's also um sorry. He's also used to all of these particular foods and it's hard getting him to expand his horizons, I'll just say, because he's also 3. So he's going to eat what he wants to eat. Um so yeah, that is where we are now. He So today he is 3. He doesn't have full control of his bowels yet. They they told me that potty training would take some time. So I'm not concerned with that yet. So he has about I want to say 15 diaper changes a day and they want us our goal is to get down to less than 6. So it's constantly managing that diet and keeping up on those medications and increasing the dosages. Um, which by the way, none of that is covered by my insurance, so that's also fun. And then lots of, expensive creams and powders for his diaper changes. And um, yeah, so that's where we are now. Um, I'm I'm a I did pull him out from daycare. I should have said that. So, right after his surgery, I had spent an extra week home with him, and then when I sent him back to daycare, I had a really hard time because he has that dairy allergy and they didn't really have a lot of options for him. So it was through a school. And so they followed the school calendar for meals. And most of the meals have dairy in them. So his options of having anything was like a ham sandwich. So it just wasn't enough for him. So because of his because of his condition, he has to eat every couple hours or he's starving because everything just runs right through him. So a ham sandwich is not going to get him very far. So, and then there was just the schedule of the diaper changes. They usually typically change kids every 2 hours, and it just wasn't often enough for him. So I just had made, I love that daycare. Don't have any problems with that daycare. It just isn't meant for someone with his condition. So I begged and begged my mom to take him back. And now he sees her. So she had said, I only want to do 3 days a week. So I went down to 4 days a week at my job. And then um, I get some help from my sister or my mother in law on that opposite day, which has been a blessing to our family because he's in the best care now with whoever he's with that day. And it just it was so much better on my heart and less anxiety for me. So now so now we are just living life with our 3-year-old in this condition. We still do follow-ups every 6 months. Um, but from what my doctors tell me, he'll be taking Imodium the rest of his life. And he'll probably do the antibiotics until he's at least 20, is what she told me. And now, actually, we've upped that. Today, he takes them 7 days on and then 7 days off. So we're now having to keep an eye on his liver enzymes. So we test those because antibiotics are really harsh for your liver. So that's it's basically my story, but I do want to talk a little bit about um what it's like on my marriage, if you're okay with that.
Please feel free.
Because I feel like this is a lot of the it's really hard to find people, of course, that have been through this. It's really hard to find anybody with Hirschsprung's disease. I The main reason why I've wanted to even do this podcast is so that I can help someone and that they can find this story and hear it and have some faith. And one of those things that I wanted to talk about was my marriage because it's really, really hard on your marriage. I mean, you're both having a newborn is hard, but because you're tired and there's a lot happening, but having a newborn with a disease is much, much harder, and the care involved. And it's now that I've been through this and I've recognized what's going on, and I've recognized what's going on with my husband. I can speak on a little bit more on filling your cup and filling your spouse's cup. There are a lot of times that, say I get up in the night 6 or 7 times to do some diaper changes, and I'm just exhausted. And I feel like it's so easy for people to say marriage is 50-50, and it's not. Sometimes you're a 10 and sometimes your husband needs to be 90 and so vice versa. So the biggest piece of advice I can say is just communicate with your partner, like, hey, I'm operating at a 10 today, I'm going to need you to step it up. Or like, um I had a really hard day at work and I'm just exhausted. He works a physically demanding job, so I get that a lot. So, and it's recognizing that we are both like very driven, hardworking people. So it takes a lot for us to really communicate that and say like, "Hey, I can't do this," because we're yes people. But so, um, just owning that and recognizing like, "Hey, I need to actually step outside and go for a walk," because there was in the aftermath of his second surgery, there was a lot of crying and a lot of screaming, just because he couldn't communicate the pain my son was having. It wears on you emotionally, it wears on you mentally, and it just gets to be a lot. So it's knowing it's knowing when you're reaching that level and being able to recognize it and communicate what you need from your partner. Like, hey, I need you to do bath night. I need you to make supper. I need a weekend away. You just need to recognize what you need and recognize what they need. So I just wanted to share that because it's really important, because I think um, just a lot of marriage advice, especially like in church and Christian households, like we're kind of taught, put your marriage first, kids come second. And that's not always easy to do, especially with a child with high needs. So um, it's taking that time, planning those date nights, being intentional. Yeah, it's just working extra to keep your marriage in check also. I mean, because you have a lot going on, and it's affecting your partner as much as it's affecting you. I think as moms, it's real easy to be poor me, poor me, poor me. This is all happening to me, but it's also happening to your husband. So to just give him that care and love as well through it. Um,
Yeah, most definitely, and I think that that's an excellent. You put that brilliantly as
yeah,
well. I mean, because it's the whole package, isn't it? It's because sometimes people think, right, well, it's just the child going through this particular thing, and they are going through
yeah,
obviously an awful lot. That, as you say, most of the time when we have surgery as Hirschsprung's children, it's very early and we can't communicate and we are going through a lot. But it's everything. It's brothers and sisters and parents and grandparents and aunties and uncles, etc. The whole side of that, the whole community, I think, is sort of affected in some way as well.
yeah,
But it's yeah, that's a lot.
yeah,
But no, I think thank you again for sharing. I mean,
yeah,
what a roller coaster of a ride. Um,
yeah.
and I know you've just touched on a little bit there as well about sort of um, what's happening now, and I guess just sort of finally, I'll ask sort of what are the hopes for the future?
Yeah, so my hope is that, my next fear is school. So I'm worried about school. I'm worried about um, how that will look for him specifically. I didn't mention, but we have had several hospital stays because he's had enterocolitis, and that's a very common infection for kiddos with Hirschsprung's disease. And I mean, I recently, in February, I took him to the Children's Museum just for a day of fun, and he has no immune system whatsoever. So he actually got very sick, and my daughter got sick as well, and she was over it the next day, but he had to go to the hospital, and we were there for 8 days because it just takes everything out of him. So he gets dehydrated very quickly because your colon is what holds water, right? So he needs to constantly stay hydrated. So it's a lot to stay on top of. So my biggest fear is school and what that will look like and what that support could look like. Part of me wants to homeschool just because I'm so terrified.
Yeah,
And I don't know what that will look like. And it's just, I try not to get too far ahead into the future because it just makes me spiral. So, um, but I mean, knowing you, I mean, are in your 30s and you're thriving, I would say, right? So
Yeah, yeah.
it gives me hope. I mean, you don't have total colonic, so I don't know if it's the same, but like I said, every child is different. And once in a while, I do find adults in the Facebook groups that give me some hope. Um, but it is a lot of unknown. So,
Yeah, you're right, but if you know, if I could give one bit of comfort from there, I do, and have interviewed quite a few people, adults, with total colonic who, are doing well, are holding down quote unquote normal jobs,
yeah,
are and if you were to look at them, same with a lot of people with Hirschsprungs, you wouldn't know any different. Some have
right,
stomas, some don't, and again, that having a stoma as well, there's so many people who achieve so many things, and
right,
again, live a very normal, happy life with stomas, and hold down normal jobs. It's just a slightly different, it's a little bit of a different lifestyle, but they're still able to do, and in a lot of cases, a lot of people that I met, they have the stoma so that they are able to do the things they want to do. If they didn't
right.
have their stoma, they wouldn't be able to. So it's a huge positive for a lot of people. So I think again, kind of why I do this is just to kind of showcase, because it's very difficult when you're trying to trawl through Facebook and try and find stuff, or Instagram or
Yeah,
whatever, and sometimes it's a lot easier to have someone tell their story or be able to show their story and say, "Hey, look, I'm doing this or that or whatever, and I've achieved this, that, the other," um, rather than trying to go out and sort of find everything yourself via sort of posts and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, there are so many people who live unbelievably extraordinary lives, and do fantastic things.
yeah,
So yeah, I mean, and obviously wish um the absolute best for your son, and thank you so much for coming on. It's been a it's been a long journey, hasn't it? I mean,
yeah,
in more ways than one, with helicopter rides, etc.
yeah,
But just want to say thank you so much for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on.
yeah. Thank you for having me. Like I said, I was kind of, so we actually, my husband and I have never, our close family knows, of course, about
Yeah,
his condition, but I've never publicly shared it just because I just have mixed feelings about it, kind of just where I don't want, sympathy for me or, I don't, I never wanted him to be treated differently or us treated differently. And now that he's 3 and I'm kind of walking through what I went through, I'm recognizing like he is different and that's okay. He is different.
absolutely,
And if
absolutely.
I can just connect and build that community with other moms who get it, because
Yeah,
my friends are great and my family is great, but unless you've actually went through what I've went through, like you can't relate. I
no,
think everyone wants to try and be supportive, but I want to build that community of moms where I could just they know they know what I went through. So
exactly, exactly. But no, thank you so much, because I think you've told his story absolutely brilliantly. But no,
thank
thank
you.
you so much for coming on, and I wish you, all the very best for the future. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.